This is the Cochise County Board of Supervisors work session Tuesday, October 24th, 2023 at 2 p.m. at the Board of Supervisors Executive Conference Room, 1415 Melody Lane, Building G, Bisbee, Arizona, 85603. Any item on this agenda is open for discussion. Roll call. Tom Crosby from District 1 is here. District 2.
And English is present.
And District 3.
Peggy Judd is here.
Okay, we have a full board. Members of the public may also attend this meeting via Microsoft Teams, computer or mobile app, or via phone by calling 602-609-7513 or 888-680-6714, conference ID 135101-671 # If you have trouble accessing this meeting remotely, call 520-432-9200 for direction. Work sessions are a time for county staff to inform and discuss agenda items with the Board of Supervisors, and public comment will not be taken. I'm Tom Crosby, and we have Ms. Gilman with us. We have Mr. Deshawn with us. We have Ms. Lowenheim. We have
Lori Lewis, Chief Admin Officer from San Jose Fire.
And we have a couple members of the public, Christy and John. Okay.
Awesome. Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So items for discussion. Daniel Deshawn, Emergency Services Director, will talk to us about, you're going to start talking to us about discussion and possible direction to the Emergency Management Department regarding the potential drafting of a county burn ban ordinance and fireworks ban ordinance.
Yes, good afternoon. Daniel Deshawn, Cochise County Emergency Management. This topic first came up back in April, May of this year with myself and Supervisor Judd with some questions about, just being more fire-wise and decreasing damage from wildfires in the county. It took a lot of research to see what the county has the authority to do and what are some of our options. Here we're talking about two separate and distinct things. One would be a burn ban ordinance and the other is a firework ban ordinance. So I'll get into those. So why irresponsible burning or use of fireworks may lead to increased fires and property damage, and then an accompanying education enforcement may prevent future wildfires or the quantity or severity of. So apologies, this is a text-heavy slide, but there's a lot of nuances here. So there's several different existing burn bans in the county based on the land management agencies. So the largest or the most reaching burn ban that we have really is the Tucson Interagency Zone Board that meets weekly during the fire season to determine if a burn ban is necessary. And that's comprised of members from the U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and State Department of Fire and Forest Management. And they determine if there should be burn bans on the land that they're stewards of, not outside of. And they determine that it's an objective decision based on whether the number of fire starts, the cause, and this is people don't realize it's also based on the number of firefighting resources in the area. So if there's ample resources, as they determine, it may affect what's permitted. Or if there are not enough fire crews in the area, they could enact a burn ban. And there's other metrics such as the 7 and 30-day weather outlooks from the National Weather Service. So we see them primarily in that, May to August, September timeframe where they meet every week and say, should we do some type of burn ban in the property that we manage? And there's different types of restrictions. Stage 1 limits campfires to developed recreation sites. Stage 2 prohibits all campfires regardless of locations. And then within that, there's different options such as shooting restrictions, restrictions on internal combustion engines, and lastly, if the forest so chose, there's a stage 3 restrictions where they say the risk is so high that they completely close the forest. I don't know if we've seen that here in Cochise County recently, but that is something that the Forest Service does have in its toolbox. Regarding some of the smaller units, the National Park Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service here in Cochise County, they have a year-round stage 1 restrictions anyways. So for those 3 NPS units, and I believe there's 1 Fish Wildlife Service unit here, there's no fires anyways. So what you're seeing the patchwork of current and existing restrictions. For burn permits through the state of Arizona, they're issued by ADQ. However, they can also be delegated to city, town, or fire district, and the listed cities, towns, and fire districts there have accepted that delegation. So if somebody wants a burn permit in these areas, they would go to their local fire district or city, but outside they would go up to the state ADQ. Burn bans. So again, we're talking about 2 separate things here. The burn ban in ARS Title 49, that in 49-112 and a few others, it outlines the authorities of counties to create further restrictions beyond what is restricted by the ADQ burn bans. And we would, if we wanted to go down this path, it would really decide on the scope of the burn ban, whether that would be just for brush piles, recreation burns, warming fires, cooking fires, or even smoking cigarettes. And the ADQ burn permit, if you read the statute, it really is mainly focused on burning brush, what they call weed abatement. There's carve-outs, so you don't need a burn permit if you're doing a fire for warming fires or cooking fires. So there's a lot of carve-outs where the primary goal of the ADQ burn permit is really for property owners to burn brush piles on their property. There's exceptions there that we've seen special events use. Well, they don't use the exceptions. It's just the exceptions in statute, so they don't need to apply for a burn permit. Albeit we've seen them do that. Working with Mr. Coxworth over in Development Services, we've seen special event permits with a burning event get a burn ban permit, even though it could be argued that they didn't need it. So there's definitely some nuances in the law here. So that's what's existing for burn bans right now. Next, we have the firework bans. And again, according to ARS Title 36, counties are authorized to ban fireworks. The existing firework restriction is all of Forest Service, Park Service, BLM, Fish and Wildlife Service, and then several municipalities already have current firework restrictions, Bisbee, Douglas, Pachuca City, and I need to add Sierra Vista to that list. So even they've created more stringent restrictions. There are itemized restrictions in ARS 36, 1606 as well as far as time of the year. So really we're talking about 2 different things, but I'm trying to emphasize is it's really a patchwork of restrictions in the county based on where you're at. One of the goals of any type of proposal like this coming from the county would be to tier it or have it triggered off of the Tucson Zone Board decision so that when they say these lands are going under restrictions, the county ordinance, if you'd like, would be triggered by that, and then we can say all of Cochise County has the same restrictions opposed to, depending on where you're at, you have different restrictions. It's easier for the public to understand what's being restricted and where. So that's one of the goals of this, provide some clarity for the public. But it's important to note too, it's season to season or year to year. This year we all anecdotally said it was very hot and very dry, but there was no fire restrictions coming out of the Tucson Zone Board anyway. So it's an interesting situation. Here, enforcement.
But let me butt in and ask you, I kept getting these things on my phone from the National Weather Service talking about the alerts,
The red
possibility
flag.
of fires.
Yeah.
So is there just one person sitting in a closet somewhere that makes that decision? Then that group wasn't mentioned on the board up there as being part of the group.
So that comes out of the National Weather Service office there in Tucson, and we're talking about two different things, and they're similar. The warnings you get for fire weather watches, fire weather advisories, a red flag day,
Right.
those are all very ephemeral, day to day. So today is a red flag day, and that comes from the Weather Service, and they push that out. That means that if there was a fire, it would have an increased likelihood of spreading fast. That is something the zone board would take into account, but the Weather Service doesn't own any land.
Right.
So they're just putting that out to everybody that says, hey, there's a red flag today, so if there's a fire, it could be bad. And then the zone board in Tucson, that multi-agency board, takes all that into consideration.
Yeah, that's something that the U.S. Forest Service takes into consideration when they're planning for fires and fighting fires, right?
Yes, and within the Forest Service, there's different ranger districts like Sierra Vista and Douglas. And I don't want to speak for them, but they're at the local level. If they receive a red flag warning for that area, they have I believe they have authority to make local decisions based on that daily situation. But what we're talking about tying into the zone board, it's more of a seasonal or weekly restriction. So if the zone board meets and says we have a certain set of objective criteria that have been met, we all together say no fires and no burn ban.
I have a question. Does the county sheriff already enforce like the DEQ burn statute? If somebody's going to have to be at that burn, I'm not supposed to.
Well, I could say that with Title 49 they legally can enforce the ADQ violations of the burn permit. So if somebody is, burning brush on their property without a burn permit, they can cite or whatever.
So this is something they already do.
Can I speak to that?
Lori?
I went to court this morning on just the same thing. And last November, we had a guy that was going to dispose of a sofa in his yard, and the flames were above 20 feet. There's a rule. You can't have a flame above 21 feet. Well, 20 was close enough for us. So that was November. December, on Christmas Day, he was burning all this Christmas trash in a barrel. We in San Jose Fire, we were 5.5 square miles in a donut. We do not issue burn permits at all. Occasionally, we'll go help a neighbor and we'll call it a training day and hang around, but no burn permits. So Christmas Day, just on September the 1st, he had created an incinerator, same guy, and created an incinerator out of a ramshackle metal shed on his property, which was on Barnett Road, okay? And we said, okay, that's it. This wasn't even counting a couple years ago when this guy got out of jail. He threatened me when I showed up, and he said he was going to sick the dogs on me. And I said, put out the fire. You're burning paint cans next to a trailer. So the statute of limitations had worn out on that. I found that out this morning. But we turned him in. We turned him in on September the 1st because this was 3 strikes and you're out, 3 minors or a major. And today I went to court, and this guy has mental issues. He's going to be on a grace probation program for a year. We're not like Bisbee. We don't say, oh, you owe us $350 and my truck for an hour. We don't do any of that stuff. So we're a friendly little district. If we hurt him, we hurt the district. So he's promised to be good for the year, and then we won't let it be on his record. But yes, but they will not enforce unless we turn them in. We, as firefighters and fire districts, do not have citing authority. We must call in law enforcement. And we did. We called in city and county on that one. because he's been a problem.
Thank you, Laura. And you raised a good point there with the hazardous materials. That's not allowed per the burn permit anyways. We're really just talking about
Nothing toxic.
the brush piles.
So, and I have to say, I've been living in our district since 1992, and I've been involved with the board since 99 and on the board since 2009. This is the first time we really cited anybody and had it go all the way to the mattress, as they say.
What is the jurisdiction of a person designated as a fire marshal?
Well, we have a state fire marshal, and that's it. For us, we're county.
Mhm.
We're county, so we utilize the state fire marshal. Bisbee has a fire marshal. Jimmy Richardson was it until he became the chief. I don't think they've replaced him. I think he's both. I think he's wearing 2 shirts or 2 hats.
Oh, what I was wondering is if a city fire marshal can operate statewide.
So we have 7 municipalities and 14 or 15 fire districts.
I thought we had like 45 fire districts total in the state.
Oh, in the, in the county.
In the county.
And each of their authority is their incorporated boundaries of the district.
Yeah.
Okay, because it isn't for a police officer can operate statewide, isn't that correct?
Yes, if they're AZ Post certified.
Yeah.
I don't believe it's the same for fire authorities.
I don't know.
It's a bit of a stretch. I believe so. So don't quote me on that.
Okay, let me boil it down to what problem are we trying to solve here?
That's a good question. I have some stats up here. This calendar year, we've had 345 brush fires here in Cochise County, dispatched by CCOM.
Mhm.
So it does include the Douglas area, or fires in Forest Service land that go directly to their dispatch. So those are, our fire districts and cities. And then of those 345, 30 of those fires rose to the significance of where emergency management was alerted. And then there was maybe 3 or 5 fires where there was actual significant property damage or evacuations.
Okay, but did the intent of the fire come from an individual who was burning, or was it from,
Lightning strike.
well, or a car that drives off to the edge of the road, and starts a fire in the grass because it's tall underneath the car?
That's the good question. Emergency management next would have to peel back the onion on the 345 fires, and we'd have to pull the individual reports and see the cause. To answer your question, then we can say we're trying to stop this.
Okay, I guess what I'm saying is, of the 345 brush fires, let's say we had a ban ordinance, because much of the county is already in a fire district. I don't happen to live in one, but that's pretty small. Douglas, Elfrida, Bisbee, all these places have a fire department or a fire district. And people can ask for the ability to burn, just like they would ask your group whether you give it or not. So how much of the county doesn't have any oversight from either a fire district or a federal government or a state government?
Mm-hmm.
So how much are we talking about that we want to look at regulating?
So I would have to pull those numbers as far as the population or the land that is outside of a fire district, but also not in the Forest Service or BLM.
Mm-hmm.
We could definitely do that with the GIS folks. I think the goal isn't to fill in the cracks, but to make everybody uniform. I think that would be one of the benefits of this.
I need to speak to this too. So Supervisor Judd here. The one of the things that initiated this is a rather large event in one of our rural areas outside of Wilcox, which isn't covered at all by a fire district. The city doesn't cover it, the Sunsites, they all offered to help, but it's about 40 minutes away for any of them to access the property if there was
That
a
what you're
runaway
referring to?
fire. So the issue is that this event sometimes is held during not a red flag event because that's weather, but during an actual shutdown of the Forest Service and the state land and things that are adjacent to this property and or very near. And we've all seen the signs on the Forest Service that show that it's a moderate danger or high danger or extreme danger. Those are I guess those are the levels 1, 2, and 3 that you were talking about, right? The restrictions. They're
Yes.
based on that. So that whenever this was starting to come up a couple of years ago, I noticed that that there was a fire restriction. When I looked at the state fire restrictions, I mean the federal fire restrictions and the forest fire restrictions, I noticed that Graham County was completely under restriction as well. And there were other counties too. I believe Greenlee was one. And I talked to Mr. DeShong about it, and we thought that maybe they were using, I mean, I don't know if he checked it out, but they were using not really the guidance, but like a trigger. They were saying, okay, there is the highest extreme fire restriction on the forest, which is included in our county. So should the whole county have a uniform ban on fires and fireworks during that highly restricted time? So that was the question. That's how it kind of started. Does that help at all?
What's that got to do with the Burning Man?
That because they're burning during a restricted time.
But they must
Now,
have had
if they're
a permit.
not, now if they are holding their event and and it's not restricted on the forest and it's not restricted in the county because of that triggering it, then they can hold their event. I think we've about figured that out. Hopefully one of the fire departments will be able to get there when it's time. But if there is a restriction, fire-wise, because of a lack of, well, all the things that Dan listed in that first couple of slides, if there's a restriction on the Forest Service property, on the state land property, then we feel like that should kind of be a blanket restriction in our county to protect against not just that, to protect against people burning, shooting, any kinds of things that could cause a wildfire. That was just how it started, how the discussion started. That's not the whole purpose for this.
In Santa Cruz County?
Ms. Judd, are you aware or not aware, was there not a site plan and a permit given for the Burning Man? I'm aware of people from the senior center who traveled to the Burning Man. A couple of weeks ago on a Friday, we had the Pit Fire, which is an outdoor kiln at Cochise College, and Purtellville, Douglas, San Jose Fire, and Sunnysides. We all stood by at the ready for that. And we got a very detailed last year and this year site plan from Ben Wilson. I find it hard to believe that the same thing had not happened with this well-publicized event called Burning Man. And I remember Bob Hollister and Ev talking about other events, and they were up in the Benson area, and they were doing radio coverage and all this kind of stuff, but those people all had permits.
Yeah, so I think we're talking about the Saguaro Man Festival.
Which they called the Burning Man, right?
Yes, more or less. That takes place there southeast of Wilcox annually. They submit a special event permit to Development Services, and then the local emergency planning committee reviews that permit, their plans, and then they've, in the past, I think 2 years now, have made recommendations to Development Services, and those recommendations were codified in the special event permit. For example, if there was a red flag day for that specific day, they could not burn. So that event did go through the process and did receive some type of restriction in their permit.
Right. Although I would say, and Development Services is in my wheelhouse. Planning for fires isn't really something that Development Services, does. It's not their forte. So they're kind of getting into a little mission creep by doing just that. Although it's good planning. special use. I think it's better seated in emergency services.
And that recommendation came from the local emergency planning committee. So Mr. Coxworth sends it to me. Then I take it to the LEPC, and the LEPC reviews all the plans, makes the recommendation. They take a vote, and then it goes back to development services for the permit.
That's good.
So I felt okay about that.
Yeah.
So basically, when you drive through a community in northern Arizona that is surrounded by forest, and I realize we are not surrounded by forest, but we do have situations where there's largely brushy areas, but everyone is under fire restriction whenever there's a forest nearby, and the forest is under fire restriction. That was the only thing that I was looking for. I appreciate Mr. DeShong going to all this detail. I do, and I needed to bring it to the board. So now I'm bringing it to the board. We have to decide as a whole. I'm not pressuring you to do one thing or another. What I am curious, because you did show the number of fires this year. Is that up from previous years? Was it just because we had a particularly dry year? And I don't know, just kind of a guess, would any of these have been prevented? Because, some of them you kind of see they probably did start along the Highway 92 at Wild Horse, and, south of Benson, Highway 90. So
That's
sometimes
another
those
question.
chains.
I don't have that information in front of me,
Okay.
but I could try to do a little digging with CCOM there and look for some year-over-year trends.
Okay.
Well,
Is it
let
for-
me ask you, we got excuse me for butting in, Tom, but we got or I did, I assume that it came to other board members, someone from the Sierra Vista area saying to me that they need to be able to burn trash in their yard. Like are you looking at saying, well, if it's bigger than 3 feet, or you just want to say, no, you can't burn anything? Because those little sticks and stuff, when you live out in the country, you're supposed to take it to the transfer station?
That's not what I'm suggesting, Adam.
Well, but that's
No.
what I'm saying is, so we need to let the public, we're not going to go to each one of these people's houses and check to see if there's, something that they burned. And I realize that anytime that we've had the weather that we're having with the wind, any kind of a small, depending on what you're burning, even little sticks, and some of them just go airborne. Some of them do not. If you don't know what you're doing, even a small fire can get ahead of you. So I'm wondering how much of this, because we're not going to be able to change rural people from all of their habits of the past, because for the most part, they're not the ones that are starting these fires. And I think when you delve into it, you will find that.
I'd like to add this also. I'm going to dispute CCOM's number of 345 brush fires, because they do not downgrade. When we get our little thing on the phone here, they will not downgrade. If they've called it a brush fire, it's a brush fire, even if it's a cooking fire by the homeless people, etc. So because they refuse to change the status of something, or maybe it's, okay, Newton this morning got a brush fire threatening a structure. Okay, so he got there. We don't know what he found yet because he's not here to tell us. But we've been called out to a brush fire. We've been called out to structure fires that ended up to be brush fires. Ooh, they're not going to be in here because they're still listed as structure fires, because CCOM doesn't change the declination of what they are. So I'm just throwing that in there too. So
I guess that goes back to the reason I asked the question, what's the problem we're trying to solve here?
It's a good question.
and if Ms.
Can I
Judd is
try-
talking,
Can I try to
If
answer it?
Go ahead, Madam Judge.
The chairman. Okay, so it would be to create a uniform whenever there's a high fire danger, not high, even extreme, whenever there's a certain level that we could decide on if it's extreme or high, it would create a uniform, kind of a blanket over the county. And of restrictions, but it would be released immediately. And actually, an ADEQ permit could probably still be given during a restricted time. If the fire department gives it, then they know, number one, they have enough resources to handle it. They're aware of the days and the amount that's being burned. I mean, I can't see that the permit would change at all, because if it's a really bad fire season and things are likely to go up in smoke, I would guess that the departments would take the responsibility of making that call and either assigning the burn permit or not. So this is more of a, I see it more as people going out camping, whether they are out on the flats somewhere or even in their backyard, whether they're going to build a great big bonfire or not, or whether they're going to shoot fireworks or not. And Supervisor English is perfectly right. Us rural people are rural people, and we're going to do what we want to do. But it would be nice to maybe have that notice out there that this is a pretty dangerous time of year, and currently all of our forests are under lockdown. Sometimes they are actually closed off, and that has created a certain level of restriction in our population countywide. So maybe that's all I can say. I don't know. I can't fix it. If you guys aren't on board, you're not. But that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Well, the forest at Sierra Vista and the forest of the Chiricahuas are miles and miles apart. So are we going to try and link, if one forest is having an extreme, then the whole county has extreme?
And that's what I was thinking is,
we're kind of big, you know, in order, it won't make sense to people that are almost 100 miles away.
yes. And as I had mentioned, one benefit would be to keep it uniform so there's no confusion. But what I wrestle with is when you look at the actual geography of the county, it's not uniform.
No.
So maybe there is a benefit to having a patchwork of regulations to meet the patchwork of geography and elevations. So there's two sides to it.
I thank you for this experience here, because it made me look stuff up and go back and train some of my people as to what's legit in the backyard. But we've already got the State Fire Safety Committee, 9 members, 3-year terms, and they already delineate 3 stages, stages 1, 2, and 3, and then actual closures of the forests. So stage 1, campfires are okay as long as it's a developed site. Stage 2, no campfires. So Ms. Judd, this stuff is actually already in place. Whether everybody is aware of it or not, I don't know. Stage 3, no campfires, no charcoal grills, stoves are okay, no smoking outside of a vehicle or a building, and then ultimately stage 4 is closures. No public access to state-owned or managed lands until the Department of Fire Management lists or rescinds its decision. So there's a body out there already deciding, and as you've already said, we're talking Coronado Forest, are we talking the Chiricahuas, are we talking
The mules.
the Mills?
Madam Judge, did you have further comment?
Yes. So that is on state land or forest property. And I don't know if you realize, at least in my area, my district, there's a real patchwork of state land and forest property. So, and people do camp and hunt and go out shooting jackrabbits on state land. And if there's a restriction that prohibits firearms or shooting, that should probably be on private land adjacent to state land, which is like every other parcel out in my area. So that's just it was just a thought that we had that kind of came up from the neighbors that didn't like the idea of giant fires burning right in their backyard. Kind of scared them. But that, if this is not the solution, it's not. I've said it a few times. I'm.
Mr. Shawn, could we back up to slide number 3?
Yes. Where? What slide?
Page 3?
Oh,
Like one year.
existing burn bans?
Yeah, that one there. And I noticed in paragraph 1, looks like line 3, a shooting restriction can go with either stage 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
And so the point that I would like to make is that you've got, as we've talked about, multiple jurisdictions and you get joint jurisdiction like BLM, it'll say something like contact the forest ranger or the sheriff or something like that. So you have besides a patchwork, you have joint stuff. So it would be nice if you could make one set of rules for all jurisdictions for everybody's benefit to have uniformity. But since I don't think that that's possible because regulations tend to grow, and if it's uniform, it would have to be whatever was the most restrictive. And furthermore, I guess DFFM is a state agency.
Yes, and I regret I should have
That's
included
okay.
an acronym.
Department of something or other,
Annex.
Forest Management.
Yeah, forestry and fire management.
So
Forest
that's
Fire
state
Management.
fire.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, that's state fire.
Okay, so the point I was going to make was you got a constitutional issue. Second Amendment says shall not be infringed. So only the federal government is not a state. You can't say the state is not a state. So the Constitution applies.
I think that one thing we can always do a better job of is when we see something that needs to get the public's attention, an educational, whether it's flyers, whether it's, concerted effort, whether it's sometimes maybe we haven't done this before, but using our flashboards with the highway department to get people's attention, or using our public service announcements, to promote some of these things. I mean, almost everyone, I say almost because I certainly can't use the term almost, is aware that fires are dangerous. And we've had several bad fires here in the county. But I can't see that a ban would fix that unless you can couch it some way that I haven't been able to think of that right now. I think that our emergency services and our sheriff work together when there are fires to keep people out of harm's way. In other words, to restrict access or to get them out, or I just don't know. I know we can ban fireworks. That's easy. Easy meaning, when you're going to get some flack from a lot of people, but, that's something that I firmly believe does cause fires. It shoots up in the air and you don't know where it's going to come down. And,
Right.
and so that's a proven fact. But a ban on burning, I think everyone assumes it's banned now. I don't know.
I don't think. No, I think you're right. I'm comfortable with that comment. I was looking at page 3. It says prohibits all campfires regardless of a location, but that's not on private property, and that's how some people have the kids go out and do parties at night. I know they still do. I know they did when I was a kid, and not that I went too much, but the kids go out and do parties. They make big old campfires. Yeah. They make big campfires out in who knows where. They call it the boonies. And that's usually on private property where they may or may not have permission. But our campfires literally, regardless of location, prohibited. Mm-hmm.
But do you think prohibiting is going to keep a teenager from doing it?
I know.
Yeah, we might put a dollar amount on. Like I say, are we going to prohibit, or are we just going to fine people when they do it? Which is our goal?
I have a comment, which was on Sunday, I was driving back. I stopped at a gas station, and one guy hops out of his car. Everybody's fueling all over the place. Hops out of the car with a cigarette going. Another gal was on the other side of her car with a cigarette going. So we want to give people credit for having common sense, but they don't always have common sense.
Right.
Or when they have oxygen that they're carrying around and they're smoking.
I have to say, in conversation with Chief Buonacorsi, Alaminas, I said, bro, and he goes, private property. And I go, there's a difference between your idea of private property and mine. Because down in Sunset Acres or something, where the houses are tinder boxes like Old Bisbee, and they're like this, Private property, you're 10 feet away from somebody else. You may be 27 acres away from somebody else in Palominas or Whetstone or Sonoyta or south of Wilcox,
Yeah.
et cetera. Sunside Pierce, well, no, you have to have 2 lots of land to even develop in Sunside Pierce. I know that.
Well, to Tom's point, I'm not a policy person here, but what you mentioned was that you can't rely on people to exercise common sense all the time. And I think the idea of having a countywide uniform burn ban gives you a platform to get information out. And that's something that Ann touched on too, that we can amplify like the weather service warnings. I think you might have been thinking about, if it's a red flag day or something, but if there was a countywide policy that said we're going to tag on, whatever this group here in the state instead, it's now appropriate to have a burn ban. You can at least communicate that out. So it gives people information and the opportunity to practice common sense. They've heard in the PSA or something that, right now in the county it's considered a burn ban, and you've got to get a permit. Check with your fire department before you do anything like burn trash in your yard. So my
So
sense on that.
It's more of a public information tool versus
The
an
oppression
enforced
legislation.
ordinance with fines and restrictions.
You can't rely on people to recognize it's windy outside, so they shouldn't be burning their trash next to forest land or state land. We'll do it. This gives them at least some information, maybe, and it gives the county sheriff and other enforcement agencies an idea that right now they ought not to be doing that, which would inform the actions they take. If they decide they're going to make contact because they see smoke coming out of someone's yard, and it's a fire ban in the county right now. Do that. Again, it's my non-legal 2 cents.
Lori, did you say you issue fire permits or not?
No, I emphatically say we do not. We do not.
They have the ability, but they don't.
No, actually, I'm not even going to say we have the ability, because the fire marshal in the state of Arizona has said nobody issues burn permits. And yet, I hear Douglas, I hear Bisbee, I hear Sierra Vista. So entities are issuing burn permits, but we're under a couple of auspices. All bees are killer bees, and nobody issues burn permits. My life is easy. Yeah. And I'm not there to make money. I'm there to suppress fires.
Well, I do think it's kind of common sense for us to have some sort of policy, whether it's a ban or not, that we put something together where we designate or where we accentuate the Tucson Interagency Zone Board's restrictions. We say this is the time when all of your public lands, sometimes your state land that's right next to your 40 acres, all of your public lands are restricted to this level. And somehow that message could be put across maybe in a less banning sort of way. Say, this makes sense. We're going to be good neighbors to our state land, good neighbors to our neighbors. But if there's no enforcement quality, like no restrict or no punishment, then we're not going to probably get their attention. But we could maybe come up with some way to at least tell people that there is a ban without them having to drive up into the Chiricahuas and see the sign, see the arrows. People should know that.
I'd like to see something in writing before I make a commitment on how I might.
That's fine. I think that's what we're doing, is talking
Good
about
idea.
that. This is in writing. It says, in the many places that are out of all jurisdictions except the county, we would be restricting these areas without trying to be the most restrictive or ban firearms.
Attempting to be least restrictive. Okay, I like that.
Well, without trying to be the most restrictive, isn't that what it said?
Well, yeah, but I think the phrase is really, we're trying to be the least restrictive. Well, no, maybe you're not trying to be the least restrictive.
I'm
Maybe
just
you're
trying not to be the most
most
restrictive.
restrictive. Okay, that's somewhere in the
Yeah.
middle. You
Yeah.
guys,
Restrictive, just, just regular restrictive.
We wouldn't
The
go
county is
above.
so conscious of burning, I think. Now, our highway department, when they're even cutting the weeds, there's a water truck behind them. And so we already have the presence out there of showing people, and that's how a lot of fires start, is somebody's mowing and you hit the rock and the dry weeds at the same time, and you drive on and the little fire starts. It's through no, I mean, they weren't burning the pasture, they were trying to cut the weeds.
or they sensed an engine fire and they pulled off the side of the road under a tree. And that happens. That happens on 80 near the tunnel.
So yeah, I realize that, there may be something that we can do, so I'm not Debbie Downer on it. It's just like I don't know what would be effective.
And again, this year was so unique where we all looked at each other, there's no rain, it's real hot, but there was no restrictions coming out of Tucson. So maybe we felt that there wasn't enough public information because of the uniqueness of the summer.
Mm.
You would go to the state site and it would say no restrictions. Every time I went in to bone up for this, it was still saying no restrictions, except for those that were already in place.
And you mentioned the feedback from the public about burning, tree, brush, grass clippings. That's already regulated through the ADEQ burn ban process. And that's only effective, I believe it's just in the summer from May 1 to September 30th.
So that they have to get a permit to do that. Is that what you're saying? That's
Yes.
regulated through the ADEQ permits
Yes.
to do that?
What jurisdiction does ADEQ cover? The whole state or just state land or what?
It's the whole state, except for the list of that last bullet where they have delegated that authority to those,
Local.
Incorporated. That's it.
yes.
The lady that contacted me, she apparently is in the Fry Fire District because she said she'd gotten a burn permit from them.
I see.
I don't know her, but it's in that area that Fry would cover something.
Well, Mr. DeShawn, thank you for your presentation. Have you gotten the feedback that you hope to get?
I don't know.
So I think the goal was for the board to provide direction or not if they would like county employees to start drafting ordinances.
You want my scribbled notes?
And I guess what I'm hearing is that there's not a clear direction to start an ordinance burn ban ordinance, but we could look at how we could improve public information outreach.
Right. And we haven't discussed fireworks.
We did not really get into fireworks. That would be a different ordinance. If
Well,
there-
no, but it's part of this.
That's part of this.
For this work session, yeah.
Yes.
So
Okay.
we have 10 minutes.
So the fireworks slide was a little bare as well. Again, as we mentioned, there's existing firework bans in Forest Service, Park Service, BLM, Fish Wildlife Service, and Bisbee, Douglas, Wichita City, and Sierra Vista. And then there's also the firework statute 36-1606, which has there's already restrictions, but it's based on the size of the county and the times of the year. For example, there's carve-outs for 4th of July and New Year's. So
So you could shoot fireworks during those times,
yeah,
4th of July.
Yes.
yes, and the county has the authority to make further restrictions.
The cities are not listed, but the cities that are not listed, I have witnessed them restricting fireworks, personal, and then even not holding their fireworks, their citywide fireworks in a particularly dry seasons. So I think our cities take care of what they do in their own communities. And once again, this is just, there's a patchwork of public land and private land, and that's still an issue in those cases where they might be banned on the BLM land or the state land, but they're not banned on the property next door. So, and people don't just camp on public lands. So anyway, I don't think that as far as fireworks use, because they have restricted it, they have really done some good work at the state. When they added the use of fireworks in the state, you're right, when you quoted that state statute, they do have some pretty specific stuff. But once again, having an information type campaign during really bad fire seasons, but it might help.
If we need to make a statement that you can't drive out of Douglas up into the Chiricahuas, I mean, Douglas has restrictions, and so you can't go out there and shoot off your fireworks. So I think there needs to be something, because people are look at now you see some fireworks in Walmart now, but major fireworks are being sold on the interstate out near the intersection, not in San Simon, but out.
They're sold at Dollar General.
In Road Forks.
Yeah, so big fireworks.
Big fireworks, yeah.
So, there's a difference between, the Twizzler on the ground, or, you see what I'm saying? It's something that then there is between the rockets. The rockets are what cause, but I'm not, somebody will walk up to me and say, well, yeah, I dropped one of those and it started a fire too. So what? We really need to look at the biggest danger, and that's the ones with power. And we need to have some kind of a ban on those everywhere except on special occasions.
It's usually measured in grams
Of gunpowder.
if you were going to craft some sort of ordinance.
So I would be in favor of that, because I think that that's one thing that would send a strong statement. Now, whether it would be enforced or not, I have no control over that, just like the speed limits. They can put restrictions there, but it's up to someone else to enforce it. I do think that we need to make a statement on the fireworks. I'm just not sure about the other, because I don't know what would resonate.
I think I know I want to think about this some more, and maybe taking Vice Chairman Crosby's suggestion and kind of tweaking it. I do think we should do something. I think we should take some sort of stand, whether it's informational and seasonal, or actually restricting things. About the rockets, the big giant fireworks that you could buy in New Mexico, they're legal there, but they're not even legal in Arizona. So I don't think anywhere in Arizona you could shoot them off, but that would kind of be up to the sheriff's departments and cities to make that call.
Well, I know if we do a fireworks ban, it's going to make one of our legislators very unhappy, but
It would only be during particular seasons where fire danger was high. If it was my way, if it was the way I would suggest, it would just be when it was fire danger was very high.
Okay. Are there further comments? If there are no further comments, then our next meeting is going to be at 3 o'clock in the Board of Supervisors Executive Conference Room regarding the reestablishment of the Cochise County Industrial Development Authority. This meeting is adjourned.